Greetings to everyone. We are the Group 6 and we are assigned to discuss about the innovative technologies for assessment tasks in teaching and learning. Specifically in ICT and assessment tasks in teaching and learning, and also the different types of assessments. By the way, I am Sydney Amristaro, and let me introduce to you my co-members. So the first one is Mr. Sabihon, Miss Saiman, Miss Sumili, Miss Sagied, Miss Sinining, to be followed by Miss Sibugan, and lastly Mr. Vidan.
The objectives of our reporting are the following. The first one is to explain the role of ICT in assessment learning. Second, to differentiate 4 types of assessment. And last, to select appropriate assessment tool.
Do you know that assessment, learning, and teaching are closely connected to each other? Why? It is because each of them can provide information and also each of them can determine instructions. So in the process of conceptualizing of plan on how to teach as the learning outcomes are put in place. So we also need to consider on how this to be evaluated. Actually, this is an important part of instruction because data gathering in this space of instruction will inform the teacher whether the students actually learn or the teacher has to consider a better approach in teaching. Although the conventional way of assessment to work, the role of ICT in the present teaching and the learning context has definitely changed the course of direction that teachers can pursue. Technology plays a vital role in assessing teachers in learning, so it involves digital devices and online applications that can be used in constructing, delivering, and reporting learners' performance.
Different types of assessment.
Formative assessment. The goal of formative assessment is to monitor student learning, to provide ongoing feedback that can be used by instructors to improve their teaching and by students to improve their learning. More specifically, formative assessments help students identify their strengths and weaknesses and target areas that need work. Help faculty recognize where students are struggling and address problems immediately. And these are the examples of formative assessment. Now, take a look with these examples. Questioning can be used to prompt students to think about what is being taught and to give the teacher information on where students are up to in their learning. Okay, class, anyone in the group can give me an example of sample sentence?
May I, sir?
Go ahead, Mr. Staru.
My brother speaks loudly.
Good. Exit sleep. Okay, class, before you go out, I want you to answer this exit sleep. You just answer here what you have learned today, okay? Exit sleep. They provide teachers with an informal measure of how well students have understood a topic or lesson. In addition, it helps students reflect on what they have learned. They allow students to express what or how they are thinking about new information.
A pleasant afternoon to each and everyone. I am Sharini Saiman and I am one of the member of the Group 6. So my topic was all about summative assessment. So what is summative assessment? So when we say summative assessment, it is a type of evaluation that takes place at the end of the learning period or unit, typically to determine the level of understanding or achievement that a student has reached in a particular subject or skill. The purpose of summative assessment is to evaluate the effectiveness of instruction and learning and to provide feedback on the attainment of the learning outcomes. Examples of summative assessment includes final exams, end of unit tests, and project evaluation. So summative assessments are often used to assign grades or to measure progress towards learning goals, and they provide a comprehensive snapshot of a student's performance. Unlike the formative assessment, which are often used to monitor progress and provide ongoing feedback throughout the learning process, the summative assessments are typically administered after the learning has taken place with the goal of evaluating the overall achievement of the student. So summative assessments plays an important role in evaluation of the student's learning and the effectiveness of instruction. So here are a few reasons why summative assessment is really important. The first one is evaluating learning. So summative assessments are used to determine the level of learning or mastery that a student has achieved in a particular subject or skills. This information can be used to evaluate the effectiveness of instruction and to determine whether learning objectives have been met. Second is assigning grades. So summative assessments are often used to assign grades or to determine the final mark for a course. So by using summative assessments to assign grades, then teachers can ensure that grades are accurately reflect a student's level of understanding and mastery. For the third one is the accountability. So summative assessments are often used to hold teachers and schools accountable for students' learning. So by measuring the students' achievement through summative assessment, then schools and teachers can demonstrate their effectiveness and accountability to students, parents, and other stakeholders. Next is identifying gaps. So summative assessments can help to identify gaps in students' learning and areas where students may need additional instruction or support. So this information can be used to guide instruction and to provide targeted interventions to help students who are struggling. Then another importance is summative assessment can motivate students. So summative assessment can also serve as a motivator for students by providing students with a clear learning objectives and measurable goals. Students can work toward achieving mastery of a subject or skill, which can be a source of pride and motivation. Then we also have evaluating instructional effectiveness. So summative assessments can be used to evaluate the effectiveness of the instructional strategies and materials. So future educators need to understand how to use summative assessment data to adjust their teaching practices and to improve students' learning outcomes. So next is meeting standards and requirements. So many educational programs and accreditation agencies require the use of summative assessments to demonstrate student learning outcomes and instructional effectiveness. So future educators need to be knowledgeable about these standards and requirements and how to meet them. And for the last one is providing feedback. So summative assessments can provide valuable feedback to both students and educators. So again, future educators need to understand how to use summative assessment data to provide feedback to students on their performance and to adjust their teaching practices based on students' learning outcomes.
Hi everyone, my name is Kathleen Justinige and I will be discussing to you the examples of summative assessment. Here's the question: why should we use summative assessment and education? Summative assessment are absolutely necessary because children in schools need to master essential skills and knowledge successful in life. Students should not be pushed through grade. When to use summative assessment? Summative assessment are the something that should be planned for student and it should be afforded ample time to study and prepare for the summative assessment. Summative assessment should be given at the end of the unit period in courses. Now here are some examples. The first example is the portfolio. They are great alternatives assessment for students who struggles with test-taking skills. The second one, the project. These are favorite students appreciate project assessment from their teachers. The third one is the interviews. They are not typically, but teachers can learn a lot about students' knowledge by simply asking questions. The fourth one is the essays. Usually require higher order thinking skills and deep request is awarded properly. The fifth one is the test. Tests may be standardized like a part or teacher, create midterms and finals. And lastly, the presentation. Being able to present, show mastery as well as develop speaking skills. So these are the examples of summative assessment.
Okay, good morning students. It's time for your summative assessment on the topic we covered this month, which is photosynthesis. Are you ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Great. So your assessment will have multiple choice questions, short answer questions, and a few diagramming questions. So you will have an hour to complete the assessment and then we'll go over it together to see how you did.
Okay, ma'am. Noted.
So let's start with the multiple choice questions. Here's the first one. What is the primary pigment used in photosynthesis? A. Chlorophyll A, B. Chlorophyll B, C. Glucose.
A. Chlorophyll.
Okay, next question. What is the source of the oxygen release during photosynthesis? A. Carbon dioxide, B. Water, C. Sunlight, D. Glucose.
B. Water.
Now let's move on to the short answer questions. Here's the question: what is photosynthesis in your own understanding?
Photosynthesis is the process by which green plants, algae, and some bacteria convert light energy from the sun into chemical energy in the process of four molecules such as glucose. Photosynthesis is an essential process for maintaining the balance of the Earth's atmosphere and the health of ecosystems.
Now let's move on to the diagramming questions. I'm going to give you a diagram of a chloroplast and you need to label the parts involved in the photosynthesis. Okay, let's review and check your answers together. In this role play, the teacher is administering a summative assessment to the class who has been studying photosynthesis. The assessment includes multiple choice questions, short answer questions, and diagramming questions. So after the assessment, the teacher and the student review the answers together to see how well she did.
So the purpose of this summative assessment is to determine how much her student has learned about photosynthesis and whether she has met the learning objectives for the unit. By reviewing her answer with the teacher, her student can see whether she did well or where she needs to improve in order to continue to learn and grow in her understanding of the topic.
Pleasant day everyone, I am Ana Del Rey Isagid and I am going to discuss the diagnostic assessment. A diagnostic assessment is a form of pre-assessment or a pre-test where teachers can evaluate students' strengths, weaknesses, knowledge, and skills before their instruction. These assessments are typically low stakes and usually don't count for grades. An identical assessment can be given post-instruction to identify if students have met a course before required learning objectives. With this form of assessment, teachers can plan meaningful and efficient instruction and can provide students with an individualized learning experience. Written by students, the diagnostic assessment is a tool for teachers to better understand what students already know about the topic when submitted before the start of a course. So, what is the purpose of diagnostic assessment? Educators may facilitate diagnostic assessment to gauge proficiency or comprehension levels before beginning a new learning unit. The purpose of diagnostic assessment is to help identify learning gaps and provide insights into comprehension that can be addressed in future instruction. Diagnostic assessment are designed to measure students' strengths, weaknesses, knowledge levels, and skill sets. These assessments aim to answer what do students already know about a specific topic.
Good day everyone, my name is Christine M. Sanini, and now I'll be discussing about what are the common diagnostic assessment tools. So without any further ado, let's proceed. So what are common diagnostic assessment tools? So there are several methods and tools for creating diagnostic assessment, like skill surveys are one of the most common tools that as students to choose between strongly agree and strongly disagree when evaluating course facts. So a more visual diagnostic assessment tools includes a concept map, and the student draws a visual diagram of the concept or information and is asked to make connections between different parts of the topic. And discussion boards are the third diagnostic tool that we can ask students to think of questions they have about the upcoming topic and ask them to answer in a peer discussion.
Diagnostic assessments collect data on what the students already know about a specific subject or a topic. The tools and methods used to build diagnostic assessments will likely remain the same no matter your discipline. However, the subject matter you evaluate students on will vary. So here are some examples of diagnostic assessment.
Good afternoon, class. Are you ready for today's activity?
Yes, ma'am.
Alright, so last meeting we discussed about the two-digit multiplication, right? So today we will review about what we have learned last meeting. So I prepared a set of questions, so please answer based on what you learned and buzz it on time, alright? For instance, if a teacher wants to start a lesson in two-digit multiplication with young pupils, they can use diagnostic assessment to make sure the lesson is delivered well. So they will want to understand if the students have grasped families, a number of place values, and one-digit multiplication before moving on to more complicated questions.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jun Chris Vidad, and now let's talk about authentic assessment. So, what is an authentic assessment? An authentic assessment is focuses on students by knowing and applying their knowledge and skills in real-life settings. A real-world assessment is meant to focus on the impact of one's work in real or realistic and often messy contexts. In real-world authentic assessment, there may or may not be mere writing or hand-on tasks, but the assessment is meant to focus on the impact of one's work in real or realistic contexts. And now, let's move on to the main purpose of an authentic assessment. The goal of authentic assessments is to evaluate a student's ability to demonstrate understanding of core learning objectives in a real-world context. Unlike traditional assessments, authentic assessment does not seek to measure rote learning and then require students to recall and restate the information. Instead, authentic assessment focuses on students' capacity to understand, analyze, and integrate instructional materials and apply that knowledge to real-world examples. Additionally, authentic assessments typically allow time for students to reflect on their work and in some instances include collaboration with cohorts. This type of tasks encourage students to use high-ordered critical thinking skills. For example, an authentic assessment in accounting class would allow students to demonstrate their ability to solve complex problems in ways that are similar to professionals in the field of accounting. Authentic assignments can help connect students to learning outcomes.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Abigail Sisibugan, and now that we already have an idea about what authentic assessment is, now I am going to discuss the characteristics and components of authentic assessment. First, authentic assessment stimulates real-life situation. Students are asked to participate in real-world tasks and activities to demonstrate their knowledge of the course or subject matter. Second, there are no right or wrong answers in authentic assessment. It is all about showing how the students can use the knowledge from the course in real-world contexts and scenarios. And authentic assessment questions are presented as poorly structured problems. It requires in-depth creativity and originality. The students have to think outside the box to create a unique solutions to the problem. Authentic assessment methods are tailored to one specific and well-defined purpose. It is complex and action-oriented. Alternative assessments spur the students to research and look for answers. The students need leverage a variety of skills and data collection methods to find practical solutions, while the authentic assessment involves both oral tasks like presentations and written tasks with open-ended questions. Now let's proceed to the components of authentic assessment. So first, authentic assessment mirrors real-world challenges. The framework of authentic assessment is to determine students' ability to apply what they've learned to solve real-world problems. The assessment has to stimulate real-world problems related to the acquired knowledge. Real-life challenges are complex, unpredictable, and often ambiguous. Students have to be the ones to determine what the actual problem is and how to effectively solve it. For example, if the authentic assessment is about conflict resolution, the question should focus on eliciting responses that demonstrate how students would resolve conflict in real world. Traditional assessment, on the other hand, would most likely ask students to list the steps to resolving a conflict. It focuses on how the students would resolve the conflict with the information they've gained. So next, authentic assessment is given to students in advance. So unlike traditional tests, where the students come prepared for the assessment but have no idea what the actual question will be, authentic assessments provide students with the questions ahead of time. This is done to give students enough time to thoroughly consider the responses before submitting them. The goal of authentic assessment is to teach students how to deal with real-life problems. Most real-life problems require time to evaluate the deliberate before deciding on how to proceed. It also helps students connect their responses of what they see around them. They have time to rehearse their solutions, look for material, and review their answers before submitting them. So another reason for this is that when we solve problems in real life, particularly when they have a real-world impact, we take quality assurance measure to ensure that the solution is effective for the problem. The same principle is used for authentic assessment. Students look at different solutions and submit the optimal one. Next is complex questions and answers. So one of the primary goals of authentic assessments is to help students hone their critical thinking skills and creativity. The goal of authentic assessment is to evaluate how students use information, resources, and critical thinking skills to solve problems rather than discovering what they don't know. Most real-life problems are much more complex than what traditional tests take into account, and they may not come as separate problems, but as one. Authentic assessments help students see how real-life problems look and how they can solve them. With authentic assessments, students practice merging information and skills from various sources to solve complex problems. An excellent authentic assessment fosters students' creativity and allows to develop original and effective solutions to complex problems. And the next component is continuous performance assessment. So unlike traditional assessments, which grade students based on their accuracy, authentic assessment examines students' performance over time and the reasons for that performance. This allows you to monitor the students' progress and see when their strengths are declining or improving. Authentic assessment use students' performance reliability or how consistent their results are to assess students' progress and why. Identifying what is impeding or contributing to students' progress aids in providing constructive feedback and allows students to know what to focus on to perform better in future assessments. So next component is we have transparent grading assessment. So one of the key issues with authentic assessment is the grading system since there are no outright right or wrong answers. For example, the success criteria for an authentic task could be originality. Students are made aware of this fact that they are given the assessment to guide them. Authentic assessments also promote students' self-assessment and encourage students to set goals for what they want to achieve per assessment. This will allow them to assess their performance at the end of the task. Most authentic assessments are objective with the multiple indicators establishing the bar for student success in the ask. Of course, the other educators must teach the same subject to make valid decisions about what should determine what success looks like in the course. So that's all with my part. Thank you for listening and God bless.
Hello and welcome to Teachings in Education, Authentic Assessments. So, why should educators use authentic assessments? Essays and class tests don't really relate to the real world. An actual driving test, which is an authentic assessment, is the best way to determine if you're going to be a good driver. Simply passing a written test isn't enough to determine driving ability. Now, how do we incorporate authentic assessments into the classroom? Art class, for example, is based on painting and projects. Art students should be assessed by their artistic talents. The curriculum of many STEM courses today are tailored for authentic assessments. So then, try your best to relate these authentic assessments to real life for students. Give students the opportunity for more lab experiments. Next, higher order thinking skills. Now, writing a column for a school paper requires students to evaluate and dissect information. Authentic assessments such as these challenge students to create and solve problems. So, having students create an anti-bullying commercial would require skills simply beyond recall. You may allow your students' imagination to create their own assessments. Next, they must apply learned knowledge. Overall, we want our students to have successful careers, and all students must one day apply what they learned in school to the work setting. Doctors not only learn anatomy, but they must apply that knowledge to their patients. Real life does not occur in multiple choice questions. Real life does not occur in essays.
So to sum up, we have to choose appropriate assessment tools. So in choosing, we have to measure the desired level of performance or level of satisfaction, productivity, efficiency of students' performance. Well, the second one is cost effective in terms of effort, time, and money. In choosing appropriate assessment tools, we also have to choose a useful that will produce results that provide information that can be used in making decisions to improve students' learning. Well, the fourth one, it needs to be reasonably accurate and truthful. It also needs to be dependable and accurate, consistent responses of